Keith Ellison of Minnesota isn't some obscure C-list Democrat. He is deputy chair of the Democratic National Committee. He nearly won the chairmanship outright last year. He's a champion still of the party's progressive wing. He's a great favorite of the grassroots. He deserves to be regarded as one of the Democratic Party's top thought leaders, such as they are. Yesterday, Ellison tweeted this, quote, "At Moon Palace Books, and I just found the book that will strike fear in the heart of Donald Trump." Now, the book Ellison was talking about is called Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook. Why would that book strike fear into the heart of the President of the United States? Well, maybe because that book advocates for political violence against people like Donald Trump and his supporters. The author is a man named Mark Bray, and he writes that violence is, quote, "a small though vital sliver of anti-fascist activity." Elsewhere in the text, he approvingly quotes an Antifa activist who says this of his political opponents, quote, "You fight them with fists so you don't have to fight them with knives. You fight them with knives so you don't have to fight them with guns. You fight them with guns so you don't have to fight them with tanks." Well, it's about as explicit a justification for political violence as there is. Bray also in the book, by the way, attacks freedom of speech. He endorses the tactic of silencing those he disagrees with. Now, of course, Bray claims to fight fascism, but he is himself a fascist. Keith Ellison believes Bray's work is admirable. He said so. Now, if you're shocked by this, you haven't followed Ellison's career for very long. He has a long history of saying repugnant things and backing extremist causes. Back in 1989, Ellison wrote that the Constitution existed only for white people. He referred to it as, quote, "their Constitution," calling it, quote, "the best evidence of a white racist conspiracy to subjugate other peoples." That's the Constitution of the United States. Ellison has spoken favorably, meanwhile, of cop killer Assata Shakur. He said he was, quote, "praying that Fidel Castro's communist regime in Cuba would not be forced to extradite her back to the United States." As a law student at the University of Minnesota, Ellison wrote a column calling for the creation of a separate black ethno-state. This is the man who is now second in command of the entire Democratic Party. Now, that ought to bother Republicans and independents. It should terrify Democrats. Most voters don't support cop killing, racial separatism, political violence, abolishing freedom of speech, and they tend to flee from politicians and parties that do support those things. Democrats at this point assume they're going to make major gains in this year's midterm elections purely on the strength of the president's low poll numbers. So at this point, they're happy to ignore haters like Keith Ellison. Ellison opposes Trump, and that's enough for now. But what would happen if Democrats actually did win and got power back in November? Suddenly, Ellison's views would matter a lot. He and people like him would have real control over your life. Are you ready for that? Keith Ellison's personal radicalism fits into another really troubling trend on the left that has massive implications for the country and for you. Last night, we talked to journalist Chadwick Moore about how on the left, in the name of fighting racism, it is now common to attack people on the basis of their race.
If you want to see racism everywhere, if you're brainwashed to see racism everywhere, or homophobia everywhere, or whatever, then you will. That's the world you will live in. You know, I was having a conversation with a woman not too long ago about this, a young upper middle class black woman, and she was talking about how badly she, gets treated on the street here in New York. And I said to her, "What if you lived for one day as a white woman and you were treated the exact same way?"
Monique Presley is a lawyer and a Democratic commentator, and she joins us now. Monique, great to see you.
Good to see you.
Totally opposed to, I think, I'm 48, I grew up in a country where you had to be, and most people I knew were totally opposed to attacking other people on the basis of their race because you can't control your race, right? You're not responsible for it.
You're saying you grew up in a country where most people...
That's where I grew up. That everyone said that at school. Most people I knew said they believed that. Maybe they didn't, but you kind of had to say that, and I believed it. I still believe it. Mm-hmm. Now I live in a world where the left still says that, and yet they do it and somehow exempt themselves from the normal rules. So you're racist, but when I attack you on the basis of your race, I'm not racist, I'm virtuous. How does that work? That seems insane to me.
I don't know how we end up in this kind of warped world where I end up doing the history lesson of history I know you know. But when you're saying you grew up in a world where people knew it was wrong to attack others on the basis of race, I'm wondering if you were in the United States of America.
I was. I was in La Jolla, California. Look, don't rewrite the history that I grew up in.
I'm not rewriting the history.
That's what I was taught, and I believe.
Of our country. And you should believe that, and that's a good belief. But if you grew up in the United States of America, then you know that not just just people's belief systems, but codified laws, right? Discriminated against people expressly because of their race. Those are the facts of the country we live in.
I'm fully aware of that.
Okay.
But I'm 48. I'm not 78. That didn't exist where I grew up. I'm just telling you, this is just true. But the point is, I believed it. I still believe it. Why don't you believe it?
But we're just a year apart. And if you're saying because you're 48, not 78, are you saying that segregation, which really didn't formally end until we were already born?
It's wrong to attack people on the basis of the race. That's all I'm saying.
It absolutely is.
Okay, then why does the left do it?
And so if people of color have been attacked because of their race, not for decades, but for generations,
I agree.
Then it's really reasonable to expect that they would take issue with that and with those who have done it for generations. And I think that
attack
is some
them on the basis of their race?
Now,
I'm missing this.
There should never be physical attacks of anyone, and there shouldn't be emotional or verbal attacks of anyone.
How about just criticizing people on the basis of their race? You can't control it. It's not a choice that you made. You shouldn't ever hold someone's race against him, because it's not his fault. That's the whole point. That's why racism is wrong, right?
That is exactly why racism is wrong.
So why is the left doing that now?
And I don't know, when you say the left, I wonder who those people are.
I don't know. Every time I pull up BuzzFeed or Huffington Post or any lefty site, there's some piece about white people are a scourge on America. They're bad. It's like, I'm not defending white people. All I'm saying is you shouldn't write off any group of people on the basis of their race. I thought that was the definition of racism, and now it's very common.
And I frankly haven't read any articles that say white people are this or white people are that just on the basis of their race. If you are white and you are also a bigot, if you are white and you are also a racist, then I've read many things that discuss a lack of understanding in this country.
You haven't heard anybody say in the last 10 years, too many white guys. It's just a white guy thing. You haven't seen any No, I'm serious.
Too many white guys where, Tucker?
Anywhere. You haven't seen anyone really? So my question to you is, are you living in this country?
And that really wouldn't make sense for the past 10 years, since the numbers of white males are decreasing in our country and the numbers of Latinos, African Americans, et cetera, are increasing.
So I guess
I have heard people talking about that balance and how that can be scary for those who are used to being in power.
Don't patronize me. I'm merely making a point that can we agree that it's always wrong, always, no matter who's doing it to whom, to dismiss people, attack them, judge them on the basis of immutable characteristics, racial characteristics, that they can't control, period.
Yes.
Amen.
Absolutely.
So then
those racial characteristics really are just skin. Remember, race is a construct. It's a legal and social construct in the United States.
Then that's kind of the case I'm making, that we agree.
Origin are different altogether.
Then why would you ever give preference in hiring or college admissions to someone solely on the basis of something he couldn't control? Isn't that the definition of racism?
Because of what we just finished talking about.
But you just agreed it was wrong.
So
why do you support it?
I said it was wrong to attack on the basis of race. I didn't say it was wrong to help on the basis of race.
Let's say you have one job and two people, and you make the decision, the deciding factor is the race of one of the people. One person is being hurt because he's the wrong race. Why is that okay?
Because he's gotten 350, maybe 400 years of benefit for being the right race.
Do you know him?
Okay.
Or are you just hold on. Do you know that? All you know about him is his race, and yet you're saying that he's benefited.
Exactly.
But you don't know anything about him other than his race. So you're saying that all people of a certain color have something in common, which is kind of the definition of racism, isn't it?
No, that's also the definition of discrimination, because all African American people in the United States have something in common. It's that they were discriminated against.
If it's
you
don't know anything
or the
about
50s,
the guy,
they have something in common in that they were subject to lynching.
From Belgium yesterday.
He could have.
He has no connection to it, but you think it's okay to deny him something because of his color.
I think that the system itself, in order to fix what is the one original sin of this country,
so we need more racism to fix racism.
Itself. I don't consider that racism
it's not
at
racism.
all.
When you do it, it's not racism.
If I am in power as an African-American woman and I insist upon you walking around with one hand tied behind your back, but I want you to plow a field,
I'm not.
then
I'm talking about the guy from. Wait a second. I'm talking about the guy from Belgium who didn't do anything, who's not connected in any way.
Can we go to my analogy at least to the finish of it?
He suffers. An individual suffers.
Yes.
But you don't consider that racism because why?
No, it's not. Because the numbers of people in this country who have been disproportionately discriminated against for hundreds of years are such that there has to be a correction for it.
So some people have to suffer on the basis of their race.
And in this country, those people have been African Americans and other people
of colors. So the guy who's done nothing wrong must suffer because other people who looked like him did something wrong.
Yes, because I, as an African American woman, yes, I absolutely call it justice.
Because you're worrying.
Well, I'm in charge now of something because I'm here, right?
Yeah, that sounds like collective punishment to me.
Well, you're probably an innocent party too, Tucker, but here you are with this show, and there probably are a number of similarly situated, talented African American males who could do just as good a job or better than you. You may be getting the benefit of your race. Do you think so? Because if that's the only difference between you and another talented journalist,
I don't think that you should punish people for things they didn't do.
I agree.
For things they're not responsible for. You just argued that you should.
But you should advance.
You just argued that you should.
It's not punishment. It's not
it's not punishment. Oh,
no,
okay.
It's not.
It's
advancement.
We're out of time. It's not punishment. It's not punishment. I love that.
Happy New Year, Tucker.
People like not getting jobs. Good to see you.